Do what you love if you love it. You'll be really good at it. I'm 75 years old, and I'm still saying, you can't tell me what to do, haha. She's the queen of calm, the master of roast chicken. The woman who made chambray chic. But behind the tranquil smiles and charming Hampton's kitchen lies a story few would dare to guess. For decades, Ina Garten built a life around comfort and grace. But her latest revelation peels back the curtain on a chapter far more raw and far more human. In her upcoming memoir, Be Ready When the Luck Happens, Garten doesn't just invite us into her pantry. She opens the door to a world that once felt anything but safe. What could drive someone so serene to finally speak the truth? What was she protecting us from all these years? And why, after building a brand on lightness, is she now ready to walk through the dark? The answers begin with a single stunning decision and the courage to share what's never been said. A life behind closed doors. In her upcoming memoir, Be Ready When the Luck Happens, Ina Garten reveals a side of her story that few could have imagined. The traumatic and fear-filled reality of her childhood. She speaks candidly about being physically afraid of her father, Charles Rosenberg, a respected surgeon, whose presence in their home was far from comforting. According to Gardner, the threat of violence was constant, even in moments of calm. I literally remember thinking, he would hurt me if I did something, she said in a recent interview. Her words are chilling, especially coming from someone known for warmth, calm, and comfort for fans who've long associated her with cozy kitchens and loving meals. This revelation adds heartbreaking context to the woman behind the apron. Fear in the Garten household wasn't just a feeling, it was a daily condition that shaped the way Ina moved through the world. Her home was not a sanctuary, but a minefield, one she navigated in silence and solitude. She recalls spending most of her time alone, in her bedroom, door closed, simply to protect herself. It wasn't a place of retreat in the traditional sense. It was survival. If there's a threat of violence, you're always afraid even when it's not happening. She explained that emotional vigilance, living in a state of constant alert, left deep impressions on her identity, long before she found her way to a cutting board or a television studio. What makes these revelations all the more poignant is how contrary they are to the persona we've seen on screen. Ina's public image has always been defined by gentle confidence and emotional steadiness, traits now seen in a more complex light. Could her measured tone and meticulous attention to detail be, in part, a response to growing up in an unpredictable environment? While Garten doesn't draw a direct line between her past trauma and her present success, the possibility lingers. Did she build a world of order and grace as a counter to the chaos of her early years? It's a question readers may now ask themselves as they revisit her cookbooks or rewatch old episodes of Barefoot. Contessa Garten's memoir doesn't aim to sensationalize, nor does it dwell in bitterness. Instead, her tone is reflective, honest, and deeply human. She doesn't condemn her father outright, but she doesn't excuse the pain he caused either. By telling the truth about her upbringing, she offers something quietly radical: the idea that trauma doesn't have to be hidden, even when you built a life designed to soothe others. It's a reminder that even those who create the most comfort for others may have had to claw their way toward comfort for themselves. And perhaps for Ina Garten, sharing that truth is its own kind of recipe, one for healing. Just when you think the storm couldn't get any colder, another presence in the house cast a different kind of shadow, one that didn't shout but quietly erased. A controlling presence. While Ina Garten's childhood was marked by fear of her father, the dynamic with her mother, Florence Rosenbug, carried a quieter but equally impactful weight. In her memoir, Be Ready When the Luck Happens, Garten recalls the emotional chill of her mother's disapproval. Florence was not physically abusive, but her presence loomed large in a different way, by systematically undermining Ina's sense of autonomy. One moment stands out when a young Ina wanted to decorate her bedroom in purple. Her mother simply said no. offering only a vague and dismissive explanation. That it would turn out badly. It was more than a design decision. It was a signal that even in her own sanctuary, Ina's preferences didn't matter. This denial wasn't about color. It was about control. Garten was already retreating into her bedroom as a means of survival from her father's temper. And yet her one space of emotional refuge was never fully her own. The message she received, whether consciously or not, was that her voice had little value, and her desires were easily dismissed. These small moments of invalidation likely contributed to the deep-seated need for order and self-reliance that would later define her adult life. Was her drive for precision and structure in the kitchen a response to this early emotional chaos? It's not something Gardner states outright, but readers may find themselves wondering. There's also the question of emotional availability. Florence was a dietitian by profession, a woman who, on paper, seemed equipped to nurture and support. But in practice, Erin Tridavina describes her as unsupportive, a parent whose presence was felt more as resistance than reassurance. The emotional distance in their relationship left Ina without the guidance or encouragement many children rely on to explore their identities. Instead of being uplifted, she learned to stay small and quiet, hoping to avoid confrontation. That silence, cultivated early, may have shaped her careful, thoughtful presence as an adult, but it came at a price. And yet Garten doesn't share these memories in anger. Rather, she reflects on them with a kind of clear-eyed acceptance. Her account isn't meant to cast blame, but to offer truth. It adds a new dimension to the woman fans thought they knew so well. Behind the inviting cookbooks and cozy kitchen moments lies a story of a girl who wasn't allowed to decorate her own room. A girl who had to fight gently and persistently to reclaim a life that was truly her own. Through this lens, Gardner's calm, curated world isn't just aesthetic. It's hard-earned. Finding safe harbor, meeting Jeffrey amid the emotional chaos of her childhood. Ina Garten found an unlikely lifeline during her teenage years. A boy named Jeffrey. Their paths first crossed in 1964, when Ina visited her older brother at Dartmouth College. Jeffrey, then a student himself, noticed Ina through a library window and asked his roommate, who coincidentally already had a date planned with her, that simple, fateful question. Who is she? What followed was the start of a relationship that would eventually span more than 5 decades. It didn't begin as a fairy tale, though. Ina later recalled their first date was a disaster, involving a New York bar she was too young to enter. But even from that rocky beginning, the foundation of something lasting was already forming. Jeffrey didn't give up. Instead, he started writing Ina letters, old-fashioned, handwritten notes that kept their connection alive. Even as she returned home to Stamford, Connecticut 6 months later, he showed up on her doorstep, ready to take her on a proper date. It wasn't just persistence, it was devotion. While many relationships formed at that age fizzle out, theirs only deepened. Ina and Jeffrey continued to date through college. And in 1968, at just 20 years old, Ina married the man who would go on to be her greatest supporter, advocate, and partner. This wasn't just young love, it was a stabilizing force in Ina's life. After years of feeling emotionally unsafe in her own home, Jeffrey became her first experience of unconditional support. In a world where she often had to shrink herself to survive, he encouraged her to take up space. He didn't try to change her or push her to meet certain expectations. Instead, he seemed to intuitively understand what she needed: kindness, respect, and room to grow. And perhaps most importantly, he gave her the confidence to believe in herself, even before she fully did. Looking back now, it's easy to view their love story through the lens of longevity and sweetness, but its early significance can't be overstated. For Ina, Jeffrey wasn't just a romantic partner. He was the first person who truly saw her for who she was and loved her anyway. In a life that had begun with so much fear and doubt, Jeffrey offered something radical: safety. and that safety would become the cornerstone of everything that followed. From bold career changes to best-selling cookbooks, in Jeffrey, Ina didn't just find a husband, she found a harbor, choosing love over prestige. In 1978, at the age of 30, Ina Garten stood at a major crossroads in her life, one that would define the rest of her journey. On paper, she had it all: a stable, prestigious career as a budget analyst at the White House, where she worked under both Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. She was writing nuclear energy policy, a job few would dare to leave behind. And yet something within her remained unfulfilled. The world of politics and policy never quite felt like home. When she stumbled across a New York Times ad for a small specialty food store for sale in West Hampton Beach, it stirred something in her. It was a dream so unlike her current reality. But it felt, as she would later describe, like my own. Making that leap, however, was not a straightforward decision. Garten had never been to the Hamptons, had no background in food retail, and barely any professional cooking experience. Her parents were stunned, and not in a good way. Her father, a surgeon, reportedly couldn't understand why she would throw away a respected government career to own a grocery store. The shock was understandable. In that era, women didn't typically leave jobs in Washington to chase food dreams in beach towns. But one voice stood out from the doubt. Jeffries, if you love it, you'll be really good at it, he told her. That single piece of advice became a guiding light and gave her the courage to walk away from convention. Still, the emotional tug of war was very real. Walking away from a government post at 16, Pennsylvania Avenue wasn't just about changing careers. It meant stepping into the unknown and trusting her own instincts, something that hadn't always been encouraged growing up. For someone who spent her childhood feeling silenced and small, this was a radical act of self-assertion. She made an offer on the store, thinking the owners might take time to respond. But to her surprise, they accepted immediately. With that, Barefoot Contessa had a new owner, and Ina had a brand new identity to forge. It's easy to romanticize this moment in hindsight. Now that Garten is a household name. But at the time, it was a deeply emotional decision filled with risk, fear, and doubt. What made the difference wasn't business acumen or culinary training, it was love. Jeffrey's unwavering belief in her wasn't just supportive, it was transformative. For Ina, choosing the food shop over the White House wasn't just about following passion. It was about choosing a life that felt authentic, grounded, and hers. In an era where prestige often outweighs personal fulfillment, Garten's story is a reminder that sometimes walking away from a dream that others admire is the only way to walk toward the one that's truly your own. The stupidest thing I've ever done. When Ina Garten purchased Barefoot Contessa in 1978, she wasn't entering a dream job, at least not at first. She was stepping into a completely unfamiliar world, one that left her overwhelmed, exhausted, and questioning everything. Honestly, the first month I was there, I thought, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life, she admitted in a candid interview. It wasn't just the steep learning curve that rattled her. It was the crushing realization that she was in over her head. She didn't know how to run a food business, had no formal culinary training, and was suddenly expected to manage a bustling shop in a town she barely knew. The panic was real. Garten had gone from writing nuclear energy budgets at the White House to waking up before dawn to prepare food for Hampton's locals. The shift wasn't just professional, it was psychological for someone who had spent years building order and safety in her life. The chaos of retail was jarring. She was working 18-hour days, juggling customer service, inventory staffing, and food preparation, all while learning the industry on the fly. At times it must have felt like everything she had walked away from in Washington had been replaced with uncertainty and fatigue. Could she really build something meaningful from this mess? But true to form, Ina didn't walk away. Instead, she doubled down on hard work and humility. She brought on Chef Anna Pump to help steady the ship, and she leaned into her natural instincts: organization, attention to detail, and care for others. Slowly the store began to thrive. But the early doubts never fully disappeared. Even years later, when the shop was successful and bustling, Garten never forgot how close she came to quitting. In those first few weeks, the irony, of course, is that what once felt like a colossal mistake would become the launching pad for one of the most beloved culinary careers in America. Reflecting on those chaotic early days, Garten has often emphasized that the discomfort was part of the process. If you could do it in the first week, you'd be bored in the second. Jeffrey reminded her during that time. Words that stuck with her. What she learned then wasn't just how to run a business, but how to navigate fear and failure without letting them define her. In an age of curated success stories and overnight influencers, Garten's story is refreshingly real. Her triumph didn't come easily. It came through doubt, exhaustion, and resilience. And in hindsight, what felt like the stupidest thing turned out to be the smartest risk she ever took. But just as Ina began questioning everything, an unexpected presence walked into her kitchen and quietly transformed her world. The woman who changed everything. When Ina Garten first took ownership of Barefoot Contessa, she was filled with doubt, exhaustion, and a constant fear of failure. It was a pivotal time, and the demands of the shop were relentless, far more than she had anticipated. Ina was still finding her footing in a world she hadn't trained for, learning by trial, error, and sheer willpower. It was in that vulnerable, transitional space that Anna Pump entered her life, not as a savior, but as a steady presence, who quietly shifted the course of Ina's story. Hired to assist in the kitchen, Anna brought more than just culinary skill. She brought calm confidence and a model of leadership that Ina hadn't experienced before. Anna's approach to food, business, and people was deeply rooted in intuition. She didn't operate with a sense of showmanship or flair, but with a kind of grounded elegance that Ina would come to adopt in her own way. Working side by side with Anna, Ina began to absorb more than just techniques. She began to understand what it meant to trust her instincts, to lean into simplicity, and to allow food to speak for itself. There was an unspoken confidence in Anna's presence that helped quiet some of the inner turmoil Ina had carried with her for years. Where Ina had grown up navigating emotional volatility, Anna offered consistency and grace. Their connection went far beyond the practicalities of the kitchen. According to Anna's daughter, Sybil Van Kempen, the two women encouraged one another in ways that were deeply personal and quietly powerful for Ina. This may have been one of the first relationships where she didn't have to prove herself in order to be respected. Anna didn't question Ina's unconventional path. She honored it in an environment that could have easily become competitive or transactional. The bond they built was rooted in shared values and mutual trust. That sense of emotional safety allowed Ina to grow, not just as a business owner, but as a person, reclaiming her sense of worth and creativity. Even years later, the emotional resonance of that friendship still lingers. Anna Pump passed away in 2015, but Ina has spoken often and lovingly about how much she misses her. The depth of that loss isn't just about losing a collaborator, it's about losing someone who saw her in a way few others had. Anna helped Ina understand that food could be beautiful without being extravagant, and that success didn't have to come with stress or severity. She modeled a quiet strength that allowed Ina to reimagine what it meant to be a leader, a mentor, and eventually a guide for millions of home cooks. Anna may never have stood in front of a television camera, but her spirit lives in every warm dish, every thoughtful recipe, and every gentle moment Ina offers to the world. In a life marked by complexity and reinvention, Anna Pump remains the woman who changed everything. Not loudly, but exactly as Ina needed. Cooking for the soul. As Ina Garten found her rhythm as the owner of Barefoot Contessa, she slowly began to uncover one of the most important lessons of her culinary career. People don't eat at home the way they do in restaurants. It was a shift in thinking that redefined her entire approach to cooking. Early on, she had tried to impress customers with elevated, elegant meals, chicken stuffed with fresh herbs, and extravagant presentations. But they didn't sell. Instead, it was the simpler dishes, served in unexpected but accessible ways, that flew off the shelves. It was a moment of clarity that helped Ina pivot from trying to be a fancy chef to becoming a thoughtful home cook with extraordinary instincts. One of the most pivotal experiences came with something as humble as a cheese board. A customer asked Ina to prepare one, and she arranged it with careful precision, only to be quietly corrected by her mentor. "Anna Pump, take everything off that platter." Anna told her, "Put a big bunch of grapes in the middle. The cheese around it, do blocks of color. And then stop yourself." That single piece of advice transformed not just how Ina presented food, but how she thought about it. Elegance didn't need complexity. In fact, the most beautiful meals were often the most restrained, an idea that would become foundational in her future cookbooks. What Ina began to realize was that her customers were teaching her what comfort really looked like. They didn't want to be wowed. They wanted to feel cared for. Her food had to do more than taste good. It had to speak to a kind of emotional hunger. That insight would eventually drive the style she's become known for: unfussy, nourishing, joyful, the kind of food you want to eat with people you love. And because Ina herself knew what it felt like to grow up in a home lacking comfort, she brought an emotional generosity to her cooking that resonated far beyond her shop's walls. These early lessons, gathered not from culinary school, but from her community, were the quiet beginnings of a voice that would go on to speak to millions. In listening closely to what her customers gravitated toward: simple roast chickens, hearty pastas, satisfying desserts, Ina wasn't just taking notes for future recipes. She was learning dish by dish how to connect. That connection became the foundation for her books. Her show and her legacy, Cooking for Ina Garten, has never just been about feeding people. It's been about understanding them. And in doing so, she found her own voice. One warm, calm, and always ready to serve. Healing through food and love. For Ina Garten, food has always been about more than just nourishment. It's been a way to connect, to comfort, and to heal. After years of navigating a childhood defined by fear and emotional distance, and a career that started in the rigid world of government policy, she found unexpected joy and purpose in the rhythm of cooking. Preparing meals became not just a creative outlet, but a grounding practice that brought stability and fulfillment. In her own words, cooking wasn't something she was born knowing how to do. It was something she grew into, something that helped her grow into herself. Amid the chaos of launching and running Barefoot, Contessa, and later transitioning into writing cookbooks and filming television, one constant source of emotional support remained her husband, Jeffrey. Nina has often said that Jeffrey never tells her what to do. He simply supports her always. In interviews, she's described him as her rock, her cheerleader, and even the person who unloads the dishwasher without being asked. It's a love rooted in mutual respect and calm reassurance, especially during overwhelming periods, like filming a TV show alone during the pandemic. Jeffrey stepped in with quiet gestures that carried great weight. Their partnership hasn't always been perfect, as Garten acknowledges in her memoir, but their willingness to grow together, even after brief periods of separation, reveals the depth of their commitment moving forward. "We could be equals who took care of each other," she writes. That desire for shared strength and emotional reciprocity echoes throughout her life and work, especially in how she speaks to her audience, never as a celebrity chef, but as a trusted friend in the kitchen. The tone she brings to her shows and books is no accident. It's a reflection of the intimacy and care she has worked so hard to build into her own life. Today, their enduring marriage serves as a model of what love looks like when it's consistent, safe, and lighthearted. Even in small things, Ina jokes that having someone to unload the dishwasher is essential to a peaceful home, but behind that humor lies a truth. After a life that once felt unpredictable and painful, she now finds strength in simple everyday love. Whether she's mixing a cosmopolitan at 9 a.m. or sharing a roast chicken recipe, there's healing in every moment she creates, not just for her audience but for herself. Through food and through Jeffrey, she found her sanctuary, finding strength in vulnerability. Ina Garten's memoir Be Ready When the Luck Happens isn't just a collection of memories, it's a testament to the quiet, often unseen journey of emotional healing. For a woman known for her polished kitchen and calm demeanor, revealing her inner world took courage. She shares not only the joy of building a beloved culinary career but the pain, fear and emotional disconnect that shaped her long before she ever picked up a whisk. This willingness to be vulnerable at this stage in her life shows a new dimension of strength, one rooted not in perfection but in honesty. Among the revelations is the acknowledgement of a brief separation from Jeffrey, a moment in their marriage that challenged their connection and forced them to reevaluate their roles in each other's lives. In her memoir, Ina writes candidly about how they worked through it. That sentiment is more than a line. It's a guiding principle. Their reconciliation wasn't about returning to what they were, but redefining what they could be. It speaks to the resilience of their relationship and Ina's belief that true intimacy comes not from avoiding difficulty, but from moving through it with intention. Her story reflects a broader message about love and partnership. Ina never paints herself or Jeffrey as perfect, only as two people deeply committed to evolving together. For readers and fans who've long idealized their relationship, this glimpse into their struggles makes their bond feel even more real. She invites people to consider that a strong marriage isn't one without conflict, but one where both people feel equally seen, heard and supported, and that kind of mutual care, she suggests, is the secret ingredient to lasting love. By sharing the most private parts of her life, from childhood trauma to marital tension, Garten reframes vulnerability not as weakness, but as power. Her willingness to show the cracks in her story only highlights the beauty of how she's filled them with love, resilience, and purpose. It's a quiet kind of bravery, and it may just be the most meaningful gift she's ever given her audience. Through her memoir, Ina reminds us that the most nourishing things in life, like a warm meal or a kind word, are rooted in the strength to be soft. And just when you think she's told you everything, Ina opens one final door, not for herself, but for those who've never had the chance to speak. A voice for the voiceless. For decades, Ina Garten has been a symbol of comfort, ease, and elegance, an icon who made entertaining look effortless and life feel gentler. But with her memoir, Be Ready When the Luck Happens, she has chosen to lift the curtain on a much more complicated truth. At 76, Garten isn't revealing her past for shock value or sympathy, she's doing it with intention. I want people to know they're not alone, she writes, in sharing the fear, rejection, and isolation of her early years. She's offering something her audience may have never expected from her: solidarity and pain and permission to hope. Why now? Why choose to reveal the most painful parts of her life after building a legacy on joy? Perhaps it's because Garten understands that healing can't happen in silence, or maybe, after decades of nurturing others through food and hospitality, she finally felt safe enough to nurture herself with truth. Her memoir seems less like a final chapter and more like a bridge, connecting the public figure to the private woman and showing her readers that success isn't a clean line from one point to another. It's often messy, painful, and hard-won. What's powerful is that Garten never positions herself as a victim. Instead, she paints a picture of resilience, formed quietly over years of small choices, choosing kindness over cruelty, choosing connection over control, and choosing to believe in love, even when it felt foreign. Her story challenges The idea that trauma has to define you. It acknowledges its presence, but refuses to let it take the final word. No matter where you come from. She says you can still choose happiness. That message is less a platitude and more a lived truth. One she had to work for in the end. Gardner's memoir isn't just about food, marriage, or even survival. It's about the radical act of telling the truth. In doing so, she becomes a voice for those who never got to speak, especially those who still feel like they're hiding behind closed doors. Her journey is proof that warmth, joy, and beauty can rise from the deepest wounds. And that sometimes the most comforting thing a person can serve isn't a perfect roast chicken, but the truth of their own story. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you see Ina Garten in a new light, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you're curious to explore more untold stories and behind-the-scenes truths, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. See you there.